Hello and welcome to the Prog Analyst. Today we're going to be talking about the Yes song Long Distance Runaround. I uploaded an introductory video to the channel that explains how these videos are going to work, so if you haven't seen that yet, I recommend you check it out. The link is in the description. In that video, I explained that for copyright reasons, I'm not going to be playing any of the original recording, so if you aren't familiar with the song yet, I'd recommend giving it a listen first, but I have my piano here if I need to demonstrate how anything sounds. For this song, I did my best to transcribe as accurately as I could each individual instrument, because the arrangement plays a crucial part in what makes this song so great. So without further ado, let's dive in. So the song starts out with the piano and the guitar panned pretty harshly, guitar to the left, piano to the right. This kind of harsh panning is pretty common in early 70s prog in general, but especially early Yes. The two instruments are harmonized mostly in thirds, and it's important to note that the song starts out in C mixolydian. We don't necessarily get that from the first downbeat. We have the E and G chord tones of C major. We have this G minor arpeggio here, an upper structure triad of C7 with the tension 9, but we pretty clearly land on C in the second measure, showing us this is home. We also see that this riff has some chromatic approach notes, which we'll see even more of later in the song. As for the phrasing of these lines, the first phrase moves upward until it hits its peak, then moves down and stops on the and of 1. This is responded to by what begins as an identical phrase, but instead goes higher here, instead of continuing down and extends the line length a little too. Repeat the first phrase, then we run down this arpeggio here, still moving in thirds. Look, another chromatic approach note into this unique rhythmic section here. Here the guitar and piano go into unison. Now we see this mess of eighth notes is actually in groups of 3. You see every third note is a melody note ascending upwards by a step. And these notes in between are more or less filling in the space. So don't let the eighth notes deceive you. The melodic rhythm here is really in sets of 3 eighth notes. Now we get a look at the bass line, which pretty clearly outlines the C arpeggio with chromatic approach notes going to each note, and a B flat in the melody at the top to emphasize that this is a C7, we're in C mixolydian. Rhythmically, the bass also accents the and of 4, where the melody also has these pickup notes. The outlining of C continues, the melodic rhythm slows here when the piano and guitar are running down, and we see the bass joins in this unison rhythm of every 3 eighth notes, playing dotted quarters. It also outlines G major here at the 5 chord of C, nothing too surprising, but very active and very in sync with the melody in the important places for the bass part there. The drum part here mostly follows this kind of rhythm, with a lot of variations though. Most importantly, you have the snare is usually on 2 and 4, and the ride cymbal is keeping quarters. Occasionally, Bill Bruford creates this really cool temporary halftime effect, like in this measure, where he places the snare drum on beat 3 just for a taste of halftime feel. And like the bass, he also accents every 3rd eighth note when we get to the unison pattern here. Now the last thing possibly worth noting in this section is that the piano and guitar are actually in unison for a little stretch. Here, Rick Wakeman on the keys actually plays the guitar part. We can see this is all unison here, and then it goes back into harmony for a measure here, back into unison. This section of the song happens 5 times, including the intro, and the second time through is the only time they play in unison, which is kind of weird. I'm not sure if it's a mistake or if it was done intentionally to scale back and then grow the arrangement when it comes back the 3rd time, but I thought it was interesting to note nonetheless. Moving ahead, we get a very abrupt modulation to either E Dorian or E minor. We don't get a C natural or a C sharp in this very short 4-bar section, so it's hard to say whether it's E Dorian or E minor. This riff in the guitar and bass will be the center point of the verses of the song that we'll get to in a sec. Here the piano is playing B minor, so a 5 minor in the key of E Dorian or E minor, and the guitar and bass parts are going along with that too. You see the 7 here, which is the A natural. And after just these 4 transitional measures, we land in E mixolydian. So how do we go from C mixolydian to E minor to E mixolydian so quickly? I think the entire purpose of this 4-bar section is to smoothen the transition from the C mixo instrumental into the E mixo verse, which would be an abrupt change if you weren't expecting it. C mixo and E minor have 5 notes in common, so it's easier to move between them than C mixo to E mixo would be, which only have 3 common notes. E minor also has that G natural, which I think if it had been a G sharp, like an E mixo, during this transitional part, it would have been very jarring since G being the 5 in C should be such an essential and stable note. So really I think the purpose of these 4 bars is to change from E mixo to E mixo just a couple notes at a time. Also, the piano and guitar unison melody from the instrumental section usually has a B flat here, but this time it's a B natural. This happens both times that the instrumental section ends and modulates to E, and it happens in both the guitar and the piano, so I doubt it's a mistake. I bet they thought the B flat sounded too out directly before an abrupt modulation to anything in E, so they changed it to a B natural to make the melody fit a little better to the following section. It's a super small detail, but I would bet an intentional one. Anyways, now that we've made it through that bizarre and difficult modulation, we have the verse in E mixolydian. The bass and guitar are in unison for now, playing this riff here. Look how the riff and the vocal melody fit each other perfectly. Neither one takes up the other space. I'll play it on the piano now and you'll hear it mostly sounds monophonic because there's very little overlap between the two. Most of the time these little 4-note riffs end on the and of 4, but you'll see it does land on the E on beat 1 twice, here and here. Not coincidentally, these are the same measures that the harmony returns to the E major chord, so really emphasizing that harmonic change returning to our home 1 chord. Our vocal melody starts off with these quick 3-note phrases. Long distance starts on F sharp, our tension 9, then resolves down to E, down to B, both of which are chord tones. Then this crazy tension 13 against the B minor chord we're moved to here, up to tension 9 with C sharp. These tensions in the melody make it really captivating and create some good dissonance, so we don't feel too comfortable where we are right now. Our first 3-note phrase is essentially answered by another 3-note phrase in the opposite direction. Then we have these 2 notes that essentially echo our first phrase. Instead of going down here like we did this time, we instead go even higher, reaching up to this A here, and the phrase is extended too, way longer than this 3-note phrase we had earlier. So we're developing this melody to continue pushing us forward into the next section. You'll notice a lot of the choices made in these verses are about pushing us forward to something. For example, this next phrase, the rhythm of the melody quickens a bit. The harmony is B minor. We have mostly chord tones. We have just the 1 here, and then going up to F sharp up to 5. Now here what I think is really cool is that the harmony changes to G major right there. But the melody here stays mostly the same. So we're hearing this in a different harmonic context than the first time we heard it. Where this B was once the first scale degree of the B minor, it's now the third of the G chord. Furthermore, the lyric on Still Remember has the same melody both times it is repeated. So there's some lyrical prosody between the Still Remember still happening a second time and the melody still being the same. Then the melody, where it once went up to F sharp, continues to build, now by going up to A, tension 9 against the G chord. That moves down and ends the phrase on E, which is a tension against the G chord, but is a chord tone in the next chord on the downbeat, setting us up for landing on C major. You'll also see that the bass and guitar riff has changed to better fit the G chord here, and then they're going to start doing something else once we land in C. The next several chords are diatonic to C major. You'll see the melody of phrases here starting on the downbeat of 1 every other measure, actually on the weaker of the 2 measures in each of these little phrases. It's a kind of phrasing we haven't seen yet, so introducing a new kind of rhythmic phrasing in this new part of the verse. Here the rhythm is continuing to quicken with more 8th notes, and if you look at the target notes at each of these phrase endings, they're getting higher and higher as they go. This one to G, then A, then B flat. Again, like we're moving somewhere. While the melody is going up, the bass is going down in the opposite direction, so increasing the range in both directions to build intensity. Here we land on B flat major, where we'll stay for these couple bars at the end of the verse. Chris Squire runs a B flat major scale here, which you might notice from listening to other Yes stuff. He uses a lot of scales or parts of scale passages in his bass writing. There's actually a masterclass where Squire is asked if he plays scales to warm up or anything, and he plays a major scale then answers no, but he does use them in his writing. I'll link the video to that masterclass if you want to hear more from Squire about his playing. Also here, the guitar part, this little lick here, is the same as the melody from the instrumental section at the beginning of the song, only now it's been transposed to B flat, so bringing the sections together for a little more cohesion. Now we'll break down the harmony a little bit in these verses. The beginning of the song switches between E major, our 1 chord, and B minor, our 5 minor chord. Both are diatonic to E mixolydian. Here we stay on B minor for a while, until we move to G here. Now G is definitely non-diatonic to E mixolydian, but it is only 1 note 1/2 step away from the B minor preceding it, so it's able to flow into it pretty seamlessly. You might think that it's acting as a flat 3 modal interchange chord at first, but then it actually behaves as a relative 5 to C major, where we land next. The next several chords are diatonic to C major. We have C, E minor, A minor, G, F, back to C, all tied together by descending bass motion. Now the B flat is a bit of a surprise, obviously non-diatonic to C major, it being the flat 7, but we're not even B flat long enough for us to really tell if it's our new home or a modal interchange chord or what's going on. The melody here gives us a strange feeling that we've arrived at some kind of target, but the way we linger on it and the continuation of the descending melody make it feel not quite like home. This B flat chord does go back to E with another very abrupt modulation. With B flat and E being a tritone apart, the 2 chords are very unrelated to one another. I think the ambiguous feeling of the B flat chord helps this change, but I think this change is even more supported by the melody. Look how it moves by stepwise motion from B flat to A, G, F. The next step in the sequence would naturally lead us to either E or E flat, and well, we are taken E by the return of the main riff and the bass. All these pieces work together to make the harmony feel like it's always in motion, moving through modulations in different modes and keys, yet still being able to return to the place it started. This gives it a cyclical feeling, almost like we're running around through these verses, with no clear sense of home, and we could theoretically continue to run through this strange cycle of chords indefinitely. I think the Mixolydian mode that's used in both the verse and instrumental section also helps this feeling of uncertainty and instability, because we don't have that natural 7, that leading tone, that gives us that feeling of dominant tension to tonic release we're so used to hearing in major music. Let's look at the drum part though, because that's another crucial element of the song that also supports the cyclical, long distance running around feeling. The snare drum hits every 5 beats, even though we're in 4/4, meaning that the snare drum hits on a different beat in each measure. There's a second guitar that also emphasizes these notes. These conflicting time signatures are not random, but are disconnected from each other, adding to the slight instability of the song, but not dissociating us from reason entirely. Then, when we hit that B flat chord, that chord of uncertainty at the end of the verse, that set of 5 is decreased to 4, then to 3. This quickening rhythm builds the intensity, propelling us into the start of the next verse again. The importance of the drum part in the song cannot be overstated because the rhythmic asynchronicity is the foundation of the instability of the song. That's the main breakdown of the different sections of the song. I'll just touch on how the verses differ slightly from one another. The second verse has 2 main differences. First, there's this little bass drum part that happens in the first measure, and 5 measures later when the snare drum is back on 1. I'm not sure why this part is here, to be honest. I like it as a development of the drum part, but he doesn't keep up with it, so I'm not sure what it's for. The other main difference is that this guitar line that originates from the intro starts earlier over the C major section of the verse, rather than in the first verse when it started over the B flat, and this will remain true for the verses to follow as well. The third verse has this nice bass slide. Not much else to say other than that Chris Squire is awesome. This comes back in the 4th verse too. The 3rd verse is actually cut short before returning to the instrumental section from the beginning, but the place it's cut short couldn't be more perfect. So we already know that we have this G chord in the verses that act as a dominant chord to a brief section in C major. But what key is our instrumental section in? C Mixolydian. So we use this G major chord here in the exact same way. Just instead of going to our verse part in C, we go to our instrumental part in C. Additionally, the lyric here is "Say Goodbye." If you had to pick one lyric out of this song to abruptly end a section, especially ending a vocal section, there's no better choice than "Say Goodbye." They're literally saying goodbye to the section. John Anderson is literally saying goodbye to the listener before he cuts out for a little while. And while this may sound a bit trivial, I do think it helps give a feeling of closure since we're stopping mid-verse. We go through the instrumental section a couple times, and when we come back to the verse, we go straight into it. We don't have those 4 transitional measures of E minor we had the first time. This is probably because at this point they've already well established the sound of their verses after doing it 3 times, and don't need to ease the listener into it anymore. They just cut to the chase. The main difference about this 4th and final verse is a vocal harmony, which is a third away from the main vocal melody most of the time. It's a simple but effective way to differentiate this verse from the others. Finally, with all the noise at the ending, I struggled a little bit to tell exactly what the harmony was. I did my best. What's important is that we do end up back at E for our last chord. How do we get there? I think the ending is mostly driven by bass motion. It moves chromatically from B flat to B natural, which is the 5 of E, then moves up the E major scale until it reaches its destination, our final chord, E major. That's my complete breakdown of Long Distance Runaround by Yes. Arguably one of the best written songs of progressive rock, undeniably one of the best arranged at the very least. Thank you for watching. If you learned something new or enjoyed the video, please like it and share with anyone else who might be interested. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else about this song you enjoyed or find interesting I might not have mentioned. If you want to see more of these videos, please subscribe as well. I have my first few videos lined up already, but if you have any suggestions of prog rock songs you want to see an analysis video of, leave those in the comments as well. The next video will be a much shorter one, analyzing the piano feature from Genesis' Birth of Fifth. Thanks again!